Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. The channel that I continually call Work in Progress and Always Evolving. And also the channel that I have this desire to make into a place where you and I can have conversations. When I say you and I mean just all of us everyday people, where we can have conversations about what we have going on in our lives that we could share, and with the hope that it's going to help somebody else, because it's truly my belief, and especially in the world that we're in today, that one of the ways we can really help one another is through our stories. And when I say our stories, what I really mean is through our experiences. So for instance, today what I'm going to be talking about is what I'm calling the tipping point. And after you listen to this video, perhaps you will have something that happened to you as a tipping point, which means, it's a time where all of a sudden, what maybe you've been trying to do or trying to change or not, all of a sudden there's this tipping point that completely puts your life in another direction. So that's what I'm going to be sharing today. So if this idea appeals to you, or you have something else that you'd like to share, then please just look below the video and you'll find my contact information. I would love to have a conversation with you. Okay, so what I'm calling a tipping point or a pivotal point is that point that many of us have more than once, I'm sure. Yes, for sure, many times it can happen. But when I say many times, it's a more rare type of thing to really have one of those radical tipping points. And then in between radical and, not just kind of, what do we want to call it, more of an everyday shift, I guess we could talk about. So we have these tipping points all the time. What I'm going to speak about today is a tipping point that was extremely, let's say it completely turned my life around. So here's what happened. When I was with my ex-husband, I had a really challenging time with him, because he basically, it was like I married my mother, because he was very emotionally abusive. However, during our time of marriage, at some point early on, I kind of just buried it. I couldn't hear it. I just kind of blocked it out, his way of speaking to me. And was definitely unhappy in that marriage, and but the reason at the moment wouldn't have been from the emotional abuse. It was just an unhappy marriage. We didn't have a good relationship, but we did have 2 children, and that could have been one of the reasons that I was blocking out what was really going on. So I started the process of trying to get a divorce 5 years before I actually got the divorce. And for many, many reasons, the family wasn't supportive. The issue with my children, who were kind of in their early teens then, and there was a lot of issues around how that would impact them. And so, I'd start toward trying to get this divorce to happen, and then I would back off because of family pressure, and just so many things were going on. But that's not what I want to talk about today, because I want to talk about the tipping point for me when I actually moved ahead and in fact got this divorce. So let me just take you through the setting that I was in. My husband and I had been visiting with a woman that I had met at work. I was doing headhunting recruiting then, and I really didn't know her very well. In fact, the whole setting of how I met her is rather strange. She called in to see about how she was calling in to see if we could help her get a particular job. Now, this recruiting group that I was with were really more government based, and we were getting grants from the government. So it was a very specific type of thing that we were placing people in. She didn't at all have those qualifications. She was in real estate at the time, and you know what, I don't remember exactly what she was looking for, but anyway, here I am on the phone with her, and I'm talking with her, and I'm thinking, you know what, I like her, she sounds good, I bet, and we were looking for another recruiter, so I thought, let me talk to her for that reason. So I kind of told her what we were looking for, explained that we were not the right agency for her and what she's looking for. However, we were looking to hire a recruiter, and I think she might be fit for the job. And she said, great, I'd love to come in and interview. So she did. And all three of us who were involved in the interviewing said, yeah, she's going to be perfect. We think really fit in well, and she accepted the position. That's how I met her. Now, I have to preface this by saying she really wasn't the type of person, and I don't know quite how to say this so it makes sense, but it just wasn't the type of person I would typically become friends with. Let me say it that way. Nothing wrong with her in a sense, but we just grew up in really different environments, and I just probably felt that we really didn't have that much in common. Now, having said that, though, I got to know her, and we became quite well acquainted with each other, so to speak. We'd go out to dinner sometimes together because the environment we worked in, sometimes we worked into the later evening. And so I started spending some time with her, is the best way to say it, but I still had this feeling like we really were on different levels. I don't know if it's levels or different ways of seeing the world. Maybe I should say it that way. So anyway, she was married, and I think this was her fourth or fifth marriage. I don't remember. It was something like that. And we planned then to get together with my husband and her husband. And I believe what we did, we went out to dinner, and then we came back to our house, and we're just, chatting and getting to know more about one another. And we'd spent the evening together and dinner, obviously, and then this was, still early evening, so to speak. So anyway, we're just hanging out and talking, and I don't remember what we were talking about at all, but probably, how we grew up, yada, yada, how you do when you're first meeting people in a way. And I hadn't met her husband, so that was getting to know him as well. And they were both very outgoing, interesting people. So at some point, though, she said to me, right in the middle, it seemed to me, of conversation, like it was out of the blue, in fact, is what it felt like. She said, why do you let your husband speak to you that way? And I was like in shock, like, what? What? She said, yes, why do you let your husband speak to you this way? And I think she repeated what he'd been doing for the entire evening, including dinner. And she said, what is it what makes you want to be treated that way? Why do you allow that? And it was absolutely a tipping point for me. It all came flowing in, flowing at me, like a tsunami coming at me of waking up, getting conscious of all the years that this had been the communication that had gone on, and that I became real clear in that moment that I had been blocking out how he spoke to me. I just blocked it out. It was like, I don't know how exactly that worked, to be honest, but I do know I blocked it out. And that sentence that she said to me, why do you allow him to speak to you that way, was what I'm calling my pivotal point, a tipping point. Now, as I mentioned before, I'd been trying to get divorced for 5 years, and there just were a lot of some complications. Divorce isn't easy, right? and I would back out. I would back down. But this time, it absolutely shifted me into how I was seeing things, and absolutely put me in a position of I'm getting this divorce. So at the same time too, I had started going, not just started, I'd been going to a therapist that was really amazing, very, it was in the days when you'd sit on pillows, and I would go to her house. Actually, she didn't even have an office, and talk with her. And at the beginning, my ex-husband went with me because we were having these problems. I don't remember the problems, but obviously, communication problems. And again, I was blocking out the abuse, the verbal abuse. And within one meeting of meeting my husband, she basically said, he's not into this. He's not going to be a part of this. It's not, we need to just work with you. So there was a clue, but, I just passed it over like everything else. So here were these two women now in my life. This one that I was working with, who's basically saying, questioning what am I doing, and is supporting me to not be treated that way. And my therapist, who also is in that same vein, because she had been speaking to me on why are you still in this relationship, even though I kept giving the reasons, excuses if you want, how I'd been trying to get divorced. Now she had gone through part of that with me. But this one evening, when that friend said, and I'm calling her a friend, but she was really like an acquaintance, said, why do you let him speak to you that way? That was the turning point. That was the pivotal point. And from that point forward, I went through with the things I had to do to get a divorce. It was not easy. It was extremely difficult. At the time, we were living in what I could call my dream home, and we'd only purchased it, I don't know, maybe a year prior to this. My family, it was still the same, very much not supportive. I didn't have one supportive person except this acquaintance that I worked with and my therapist. That was it. And it was a very, very scary and frightening time. There was absolutely, with my kids, it was devastating. I was the, scapegoat in a way, I guess you could call it. In other words, it was all my fault that we were having to go through this divorce. And the kids, it was a major upset for the kids. They had to change schools, etc. And actually, this set me on a whole other direction in my life. It was a radical shift. I ended up moving to California at the time, which I'd always wanted to live in California. Don't ask me why. I'd never even been here. There were reasons actually why, but I won't go into those right now. And the friends, that we had were not supportive of it. Of course, family wasn't. Nobody was. So I was out there on my own, the bad guy, who was going to get this divorce. But man, it was a pivotal point. I knew I was going ahead with it. And, did everything it was most important to me, no matter what, I had to get out of this marriage. And including, I didn't even have my own attorney. We shared the same attorney, which is insane. And, I basically walked away with pretty much nothing financially from this marriage. I just knew I had to get out of this marriage. And even the move to California was insane. It was a lot of high risk, really. So it's not like everything just from that point forward went like smooth, like no problem. No, there were plenty of problems. There was plenty of, what do I want to say, adversity going on, and family issues, and the whole thing was just extremely challenging. But when I look back on it, I wouldn't have changed a thing. Because from that moment forward, my life, it would be, after I went through all the, trauma and drama, then that took definitely some time, quite a long time when I look back on it. And then walking away with basically nothing after being married for 16 years. Nothing financially, basically. I think I ended up with a few pieces of furniture. All of that didn't matter. Now, the thing that did matter and the heartbreak were my children, because they were being majorly influenced by family to not support me. However, in the end, my youngest daughter did end up moving with me to California. The oldest stayed with her father, and it created a major difficulty in the relationship with me and my children, because kids don't want the divorce. Even though they knew what went on with their father and me, and they actually, in his way of being, they were quite afraid of him at many times. He was like, he wasn't physically violent with them at all, but he used the emotional abuse with them. But I think they didn't even realize that, because they were so used to hearing it in my husband and my communication. So that was the worst part. But even with that, this may sound really kind of harsh, I wouldn't change I wouldn't change what happened, So it wasn't all pretty, but it was definitely something vital for me to have a life. I think if I'd have stayed in that relationship, I would not have lasted physically for a very long time. Meaning, I know at the time, I sometimes had suicidal ideas or suicidal thoughts, like I just can't do this anymore. And what was this? It was just I was kind of like in a daze in a way. I just had no life in me. And even though, of course, I knew he was emotionally abusive from forever, I still was blocking that. So there was kind of always a question mark, could I get clear on why I wanted this divorce? And, I could say things like, I don't like the way I'm treated. Oh, but look, you've got this beautiful home and blah, blah, blah. And you've been married this long, and you've got these kids that need to, at a difficult time in their life as teens. So there was all of that coming in. Yet, I don't think I could have been any more miserable, really, than I was. And it was timing. And when I look at this is what's amazing. I have a belief, and I think I've always had, and I'm calling it a belief, I don't even mean a belief. I've had a sense, a gut feeling that nothing happens by accident. And, as I've been on the spiritual path and really spent the time now for many, many, many years investigating my inner world, and kind of just getting more in tune and more in touch with what's life about and how does it work. And no, I don't have all the answers, not even close. However, what I've gotten out of that is that we come into this life needing to learn something, wanting to learn something. And when I see how this whole thing came together, I say this didn't happen randomly. In other words, this woman that all of a sudden enters my life in a phone call, that she wasn't even qualified. I normally would have just said, I'm sorry, but we can't help you. But instead, I'm inviting her to come in and talk to us, right? And again, this person was not of the type of person that I'm going to become best friends with. As I mentioned, she had a hard life. Let me just say this. She grew up in a hard way. She'd been through many, many marriages, and she'd, did what she had to do sometimes to survive. And I just wasn't coming from that place. So here's this person, just nobody I would have normally connected with, but I did. And she comes in wanting to get a job and ends up coming on board with my company, or not, wasn't mine actually, it was two women that owned it and I worked with them, to, do something she'd never done. And it was pretty much a commission type of position, and here she was looking to get a salary. So that's why she wanted to leave real estate. So nothing made sense, right? Very weird. And even in the way that I had found my therapist was kind of off the wall. Like I heard about her through somebody that I had very little connection with. And for some reason, I just decided to call her and see what she did. And she, it wasn't, again, the way that I would have typically gone. Because here she was, kind of a hippie type that worked from her out of her home. And, even the person that gave me the name, I can't remember exactly the story now, but it wasn't because she was going to her. She had just heard about her, I think from a friend or something. So that was kind of haphazard, if you want to say it that way. I don't know how else to call it. So all these little pieces were coming together in such a, what could appear like a random way, and quickly, by the way. Everything just moved forward so fast after that event at my home, where this acquaintance was saying, why do you let him speak to you that way? And in fact, this same acquaintance was the reason, how do I want to say it, part of how I ended up coming to California, and her support in doing that. And it was a risky situation. I'd met this man actually in a I think it was disco then, a disco bar. I'd gone out with this couple because I knew now this is over, this marriage is over, and it was my birthday, and they said, no, we want to take you disco dancing. We like disco dancing, so let's go. And I went with them, and then in that, this guy asked me to dance. Fine. I'm knowing I'm not divorced. I'm still married. However, so I meet him, and it ends up, without going into all the story here, because that would be another video, unlike me, 100% unlike me, I end up traveling with him to California. And the only thing I had was my clothes, and I don't even think I had all my clothes, and my car, and that was it. And I just wanted to move to California, and a few bucks that I'd had that I could take. A few bucks to mean I had enough to get there. And he drove his car, I drove my car, and he wanted to be a boyfriend. And at that time, I let go of all my common sense that I thought I always had. I let go of who I really was as a individual, as a certain person, a person that had certain values. Like, this isn't something that this Susie would do. I mean, it was like as if somebody else took over my life, but I didn't resist it. I went with it. And due to that, and like I said, there were difficult times and scary times, because this guy ended up really a weirdo. But I end up in California, and I end up, after kind of getting a job through this weirdo guy, which was selling gift lines and so forth. That was not me. Anyway, I finally end up, I was going to say getting rid of him. Well, that's kind of what it was like, to get away from him, because he was a scary guy, and that took on a whole other life, but it happened. So again, I wouldn't change anything. I would not change anything that happened. It's just the way it had to happen, and I think he was definitely a part of the plan, And also, that's where I met my now husband, who I've been with for mucho años, yeah. And so that's where I met him once in California. But within I don't know, I'd been here about I'd probably been here about a year. And I met him in an odd way as well, which I won't even go into that. But it was, again, not at random. When I look back on my life at that time, or a lot of different times, but particularly that time, I truly get that all things were planned out. Everything happened exactly as it should. And was it all ending up like this perfect story, happily ever after, no problems? No. There were plenty of challenges. There always are. There still is, really. But I wouldn't have changed it. So that was my tipping point. I'm wondering what your tipping points might be. Did you have something similar? Did where somebody just said something and that was a pivotal point for you and it shifted and changed your life in a radical way like mine? It was really radical how it changed my life and allowed me to really become the truth of who I am, more or less. To become the person I was supposed to, or I had in me, but had never, had not completely exposed, was kind of hidden. It was just such a huge shift in everything about me. It was like a new version of me that happened during that time. I'm wondering if any of you can resonate, like where you had a pivoting point, like maybe for some people it could be they stopped going to college and started their own company. It could be, or spent all the time and money to become a doctor and then discovered it was a pivotal point or a turning point, didn't want to be a doctor. It's those times where it's a major shift, right? Yet a major shift and can be looked at like, what's going on with you, right? Like you can be looked at like maybe you've lost your mind. And I'd love to hear your stories or have a conversation with you if you have had a tipping point or pivotal time where you had such a shift. If you'd like to share it, I would love to have that conversation. In fact, I did have a conversation just very recently, 2 conversations in fact, with a gentleman named Ray Foster. I'll put the link to our conversation, and we had it on Zoom, and it's on my channel. And he went through a really radical shift just a couple years ago. I mean, huge. Like he had health problems. This was part of what was going on, and he lost 90 pounds. He got off all his meds. This is not about losing weight and getting off meds. This is about what triggered him to make a radical shift in his life to who he is now a couple years later. And that shift happened because his wife said to him, at the time, said to him, if you love me, why don't you show it? And that will put him tripped him into this radical shift that happened. And it's a really interesting story. We had part 1 and part 2 conversations. Part 1 I've got is on the YouTube right now. I'll give you that link to part 1, and you can listen to that. And part 2 will come out a little later this month of May. So that's something interesting to look at. Or maybe you're in a situation right now that you're needing that tipping point or that pivotal place, but you realize that you're kind of, in this situation that's not where you want to be. And maybe you've had close to a pivotal point or a tipping point, but you've gotten afraid and you didn't move forward with it, like I did so many times in trying to get that divorce for the 5 years. But those really weren't tipping points. They were close, but not quite there, right? And so I really needed this slap in the face, is what it really was like, or cold water dumped on my head. It was truly a wake-up call. So I wanted to share that because I think it's such an important aspect of our journey here, of the journey that we're on, this whole lifetime that we're experiencing, and particularly now, right now, as we're going through such a challenging time, as we're trying to move through this evolutionary process. There's tipping points, I think, probably happening all over the place, because we need to deconstruct right now so many of our beliefs, that are no longer serving us, our ways of behaving that are no longer serving us. So I have a sense that a bunch of us are probably going through this pivotal turning point, whatever you want to call it, time. And a lot of people through this process are actually waking up out of this illusion. So there's a lot going on right now, and as it needs to be, because we're really at a time of moving outside of where we've been. So it's kind of timely, I think, to talk about these what I keep calling tipping points. Sorry I keep saying that word, but it means so much to me. So I hope this made sense, and I hope this might help some of you if you're in the middle of something where you're kind of teetering back and forth. Should I, shouldn't I? Kind of just go deep within, and look within, and ask your guides, ask for some tipping point, for something to be said that can help you pivot into that next version of who you want to be, or who you should be, really. So I'd love to hear comments. If you want to share something, it'd be great, because that can help one another as well. And as I've mentioned before, if you'd like to have a conversation and you could share your times where you've had a pivoting point, however that was, like I said, it can be all over the place. It could be a job, it could be a marriage, it could be meeting your wife, it could be anything where you see that there was something that completely radically shifted all the things in your life and took you in another direction. Then I'd love to have a conversation with you, and it would help a lot of others. So definitely look below this video and for my contact information. Give me a holler, and let's see if we can't have a conversation about what it's been like for you. And also, maybe I already said this, but I'll put the link below for this gentleman, Ray Foster, that I had this conversation with recently, of his story. It's absolutely inspiring, so you want to definitely go look at that. And if you did like this video, then please click like. I'd really appreciate it. And by the way, I want you to know, any of those of you that do comment or sometimes send me an email talking about where you've been or what you've been doing, and just, maybe you resonated with one of my videos, I don't know, but I so appreciate all the contact, all the connection, all the connection that I get to have with some of you. So, with that, like I said, please, maybe I didn't say, sorry, I'm kind of I'm off my course for a moment, but please click like if you like the video, and please subscribe to my channel, and like I said, please leave a comment. That would be awesome. So, and one last thing, I know I say this all the time, but I keep working on it, and I think we all are, and I think it's so important, is to be kind to yourself, because that's the way we can be kind to others. But the first step is learning to be kind to yourself. It's not easy. It's a challenge for most of us, because we've not come from a place of being kind to ourselves. In fact, for many of us, we are harsh and unkind to ourselves because of our programming or our conditioning and how we grew up, etc. But now it's absolutely imperative that we learn to be kind to ourselves for the purpose of helping all of us through this evolutionary process. So I know, I hope this doesn't drive people crazy, because I always am saying this at an end of a video, but it's so, so important. And until the next time, I so look forward to seeing you again, and I hope you come again. Take care in the meantime as I click off on this video. Those of you that have watched my videos, you know, I have this little clicker thing, and I wanted to click off in one click because I like the control, right? But it usually doesn't, so let's see what happens today. In the meantime, take care.